Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yes, a reading from Canto 2, Chapter 4, Text 21. Yad angra bhidhyana samadhi dhautaya dhiyanu pashyanti hi tattvam atmanaha vadanti chaitat kavayo yatharucham Same mukundo bhagavan prasidatam Yadangraya bhidhyana samadhi dhautaya Dhiyanu pashyanti hi tattvam atmanaha Vadanti chaitat kavayo yatharucham Same mukundo bhagavan prasidatam Yadangraya bhidhyana samadhi dhautaya Dhiyanu pashyanti hi tattvam atmanaha Vadanti chaitat kavayo yatharucham Same mukundo bhagavan prasidatam Yadangriya vidyana samadhi dhautaya Yanti Shanti Tattvam Atmanaha Vadanti Chaitat Kavayo Yatarucham Same Mukundo Bhagavan Prasidatam Yadhangriya Bhidyana Samadhi Dhautaya Dhiyanu pashyanti hi tattvam atmanaha Vadanti chaitat kavayo yatharucham Same mukundo bhagavan prasidatam Yadangriya vidhyana samadhi dhautaya Dhiyanu pashyanti hi tattvam atmanaha Vadanti chaitat kavayo yatharucham Same mukundo bhagavan prasidatam Yat Angri, whose lotus feet, abhidhyana, thinking of at every second, samadhi, trance, dhautaya, being washed off, dhiya, by such clean intelligence, anupashyanti, does see by the following authorities. He, certainly, tattvam, the absolute truth, atmanaha, of the Supreme Lord and of oneself. Vadanti, they say, cha, also, etat, this, kavayaha, philosophers or learned scholars. Yatharucham, as he thinks, saha, he, me, mine, mukundaha, Lord Krishna, who gives liberation, Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead, Prasidatam, be pleased with me. Translation. It is the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna who gives liberation. By thinking of his lotus feet at every second, following in the footsteps of authorities, the devotee in trance can see the absolute truth. The learned mental speculators, however, think of him according to their whims. May the Lord be pleased with me. Purport. The mystic yogis, after a strenuous effort to control the senses, may be situated in a trance of yoga just to have a vision of the supersoul within everyone. But the pure devotee, simply by remembering the Lord's lotus feet at every second, at once becomes established in real trance because, by such realization, his mind and intelligence are completely cleansed of the diseases of material enjoyment. The pure devotee thinks himself fallen into the ocean of birth and death, and incessantly prays to the Lord to lift him up. He only aspires to become a speck of transcendental dust at the lotus feet of the Lord. The pure devotee, by the grace of the Lord, absolutely loses all attraction for material enjoyment. And to keep free from contamination, he always thinks of the lotus feet of the Lord. King Kulashekar, a great devotee of the Lord, prayed, Krishna tvadiya padapankaja panjarantam adyaiva me vishatu manasa rajahamsaha prana prayana samaye kapha vata pittaihi kantha varodhana vidhau smaranam kutaste. My Lord Krishna, I pray that the swan of my mind may immediately sink down to the stems of the lotus feet of your Lordship and be locked in their network. Otherwise, at the time of my final breath, when my throat is choked up with cough, how will it be possible to think of you? There is an intimate relationship between the swan and the lotus stem, so the comparison is very appropriate. Without becoming a swan, or paramahamsa, one cannot enter into the network of the lotus feet of the Lord. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, the mental speculators, even by dint of learned scholarship, cannot even dream of the absolute truth by speculating over it for eternity. The Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to such mental speculators. And because they cannot enter into the network stem of the lotus feet of the Lord, all mental speculators differ in conclusions, and at the end they make useless compromise by saying, as many conclusions as many ways, according to one's inclination, yatha rucham. But the Lord is not like a shopkeeper trying to please all sorts of customers in a mental speculator exchange. The Lord is what he is, the absolute personality of Godhead, and he demands absolute surrender unto him only. The pure devotee, however, by following the ways of the previous acharyas or authorities, can see the Supreme Lord through the transparent medium of a bona fide spiritual master, anupashyanti. The pure devotee never tries to see the Lord by mental speculation, but by following in the footsteps of the acharyas, mahajano yena gatassa pantaha. Therefore, there is no difference in conclusions amongst the Vaishnava acharyas regarding the Lord and the devotees. Lord Chaitanya asserts that the living entity, Jiva, is eternally the servitor of the Lord, and that he is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord. This tattva of Lord Chaitanya is shared by all four sampradayas of the Vaishnava school, all accepting eternal servitude to the Lord even after salvation. And there is no authorized Vaishnava acharya who may think of the Lord and himself as one. This humbleness of the pure devotee, who is 100% engaged in his service, puts the devotee of the Lord in a trance by which to realize everything. Because to the sincere devotee of the Lord reveals himself, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text 10. The Lord, being the Lord of intelligence in everyone, even in the non-devotee, favors his devotee with proper intelligence so that automatically the pure devotee is enlightened with the factual truth about the Lord and his different energies. The Lord is revealed not by one's speculative power or by one's verbal jugglery over the absolute truth. Rather, he reveals himself to a devotee when he is fully satisfied by the devotee's service attitude. Shukadev Goswami is not a mental speculator or a compromiser of the theory of as many ways, as many conclusions. Rather, he prays to the Lord only, invoking his transcendental pleasure. That is the way of knowing the Lord. And again, the translation. It is the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna who gives liberation. By thinking of his lotus feet at every second, following in the footsteps of authorities, the devotee in trance can see the absolute truth. The learned mental speculators, however, think of him according to their whims. May the Lord be pleased with me. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we just finished reading this. I was thinking it's probably good that I'm not teaching CC on Wednesdays, because by the end of today everyone will be sick and tired of me. But so we just finished reading this text, and Prabhupada again has given a very nectar purport. I was just thinking, as I was reading, I was remembering Prabhupada's talking about all the mental speculators and how Krishna reserves the right to reveal himself to them. And I was reminded, I was reading a while ago, I was reading an essay on Chaitanya Charitamrita by a scholar. I forgot his name. Who cares, really? But he was writing about the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he was saying about how it was, this part didn't happen, this part didn't happen, this couldn't have happened, and he gave all these reasons. He was going through all these pastimes, and he said, well, this probably didn't happen here, this probably didn't happen here. And he was giving his very... he seemed to have some knowledge, of course, like he had to have a strong knowledge of history and of the Chaitanya Charitamrita itself, able to line up those two things and try to show how it doesn't work out. And I remember reading him, and I remember thinking, well, this is a bit intimidating. But then I was reading, because he published that paper online, and there was some comments, and this person was commenting some conclusions based on what he had written. But he was going a bit further than the scholar wanted, so the scholar was getting clearly a little aggravated. So they were both having a bit of a debate, the two academics, and then at one point, he actually, because the other scholar who was irritating this one scholar, he was using that scholar who was trying to refute the first scholar's arguments in order to make his own point. And then at one point, that first scholar got so fed up, he just refuted every single one of his points in the comments just in order that he could win that argument against that other scholar. He was getting so frustrated, he thought, I don't want this person to make his overall point, so I'm going to sabotage my whole essay. And bit by bit, he disproves every single point. He says, actually, it's not certain that this would be so-and-so because of all of these reasons. And actually, for example, he used the argument of when Mahaprabhu argues with the Buddhists in Madhya Lila, and he says, actually, he was trying to prove that no Buddhist would be so poorly educated in Buddhist philosophy to be beaten that quickly. But then he actually provides all of these references to Buddhist texts at the time, which shows that's exactly how they would have thought. So he said, actually, it's very possible they would have been arguing like this, and all these other pastimes. So I thought it was interesting. It shows that intelligence can be so misguided and can be so silly. And then so much confidence then is placed on these materialist conceptions. If one were to read only his essay, they would think, well, here, how can we come back from this? This is a rather thorough refutation. And then in his comments, though, he's showing that actually there is... there's no solid, substantial foundation for these sort of rejections. And yet, they so confidently make these opinions. So happily and confidently they'll say this is not true. And it's something one might say, well, you can't be certain of many things. There'll always need to be a leap of faith. But on such small, weak, substantial, subjective arguments, to reject such great claims as texts like the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there needs to be a far greater amount of evidence or a far greater thought process to be done in order to reject something which is of such substantial importance. But obviously, such arguments and such proofs won't be found because the Chaitanya Charitamrita and, of course, Bhagavatam and all the other Vedic literatures are all true and factual and therefore can't be refuted. So, again, it'll reflect the fact that being mental speculators, their hearts are not open to that truth, and therefore they will latch on to whatever small things they can in order to express that rebellion, even if they themselves deep down realize the intellectual insufficiencies of their worldview. So I thought that was an interesting thing. I laughed a bit when I saw him trying to refute himself in order to beat the other scholar. That also showed, I think, the pride in his own ideas. He didn't want to let this other scholar, who was his competitor, to get the leg up on him. So, so I thought that was interesting. There's another nice point Prabhupada mentions here in his purport, that, that the pure devotee is simply remembering the Lord's lotus feet, and he is engaged in the chanting of the holy name. And I remember there's a pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where these people in, I forgot which village now, they asked him, who is a devotee? And Mahaprabhu said, the Kanishta, the beginning devotee, is a person who has taken the pure name of the Lord, he has taken it once. So this is a nice way Mahaprabhu gives of dividing the Kanishta and the Madhyama and the Uttama. So the Kanishta Adhikari, he is one person, he is maybe speaking many other things, but every once in a while, he says the name of the Lord. And therefore, he is a Kanishta, he is a beginner. Then they ask again, but then who is a pure devotee? And Mahaprabhu, he says, the Madhyama Adhikari. He is somebody who is constantly chanting the holy names. He is constantly engaged, either in the service to the holy names or in chanting them directly. So this is a Madhyama. And again they ask, they say, who is an Uttamadhikari? Who is the highest qualified devotee? And Mahaprabhu says the Uttamadhikari is somebody who, by his chanting, he is encouraged, he causes others to chant. That by one seeing this devotee, they begin to chant themselves. This is the highest level of a devotee. And of course we know Srila Prabhupada so wonderfully embodied this. When he came to America, he chanted under the tree, he was chanting, and from this he inspired a whole movement, which in only a decade spread all around the world, 108 temples, so on and so forth, all these great achievements. And in fact, Prabhupada's potency among Uttamadhikaris, Srila Prabhupada is even then esteemed. Because it is not just, Mahaprabhu says that by seeing the Uttamadhikari, by seeing these devotees, people are impelled themselves to chant the holy names of the Lord. But Srila Prabhupada's potency was so great that even by seeing his followers, when people would see the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, or when people see the followers of Srila Prabhupada today, they see them and what do they say? They say, those are those Hare Krishnas. Then they themselves, they say again the names of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada's potency was so great, not only by seeing him, are people impelled to say the names of the Lord, but even by seeing his followers, that Shakti is overflowing, that potency, that qualification is superfluous. And even by seeing the devotees of Srila Prabhupada, who we know that maybe not all are Uttamadhikaris, even by them, people are impelled and therefore brought in to saying the holy names of the Lord. So that is the basic nature. But we know Prabhupada also said in his pastimes, he was speaking about he was asked how to avoid to fall down into the clutches of Maya, and Srila Prabhupada himself said, I am avoiding it only by praying constantly to Krishna that he does not let me. This is, of course, the humility of Srila Prabhupada, and we see also, though, it is the mood of the pure devotee. He remains pure by his constant absorption in Krishna, as we see here this wonderful prayer of Maharaj Kulashekar, which also, an interesting side note, there was a band, a musical band in the 90s. They have it's the only track in the UK, purely in Sanskrit, to come number one on the charts. They sang Govinda Jaya Jaya. And the band was called Kula Shaker. So it was a shaking kula, whatever a kula is, but it was just, they named themselves after Kula Shekhar, which is interesting. They fell out of fashion, out of a controversy, unfortunately, because of course the swastika is a pious symbol in Vedic culture. But at the time, it was not so well known in the UK, so they had a swastika on one of their albums, and they got in controversy. People were saying they were Nazis or something, and then their career ended, unfortunately. But interesting note. But so this is a wonderful prayer that may stay at the lotus feet of the Lord. Actually, I was remembering there's one sweet verse which is saying that Lord, I'm like, speaking to Krishna. It's a poetic, I forgot who it's by, but it's saying, I'm like a bumblebee. I'm like a bumblebee, and I'm trying to go to the lotus feet so that I might try to find some nectar at this lotus flower. Please, Lord, while I am searching for there, please close your right eye. And if you can close your right eye, then I will have all satisfaction in my life. And I remember when I first read this, I thought, what's he talking about? What's going on? But actually, it's a really sweet depiction, because coming at the lotus, the bee is there, and he's seeing the lotus flower. And we know, actually, is it the right eye that correlates to the sun, or is it the left eye that correlates to the sun? It's considered in poetics, I'm pretty sure it's the right eye of Krishna that correlates to the sun, and the left eye correlates to the moon. So as the lotus closes at night, the poet is saying, please close your right eye so that the sun may set, and with the sun setting, that lotus can close. And with that lotus closing, I, the bee, at the flower, may be captured at your lotus feet forever. It's a very beautiful poem. It was shared by Hari Parshad Prabhu. So I thought it was very sweet. It reminded me a little of this, a bit more famous text. And that, of course, is the place where the devotees wish to stay. At the lotus feet is where service is most available. To meditate constantly on the lotus feet is not merely a passive thing to sit down and think of the beautiful feet of Krishna with all of his markings and all, as good as that is, but it is also an active thing. To think of the feet means to think of how we can serve the lotus feet of the Lord. It is a meditation in action. It is a meditation not only of passiveness, but which should impel one to active service, to action. It is a philosophy, of course, of inaction in a sense. It is neither karma or vikarma, as we read in the Ishopanishad, but it is a philosophy of akarma. It is inaction because it is not material action, but it is not material work, but it is still action. Devotional service is on a platform outside of karma, but it is still something that is done. So it is not that such meditations are a passive thing, as the impersonalists will present, and they will have very wondrous speculative philosophies, as Prabhupada criticizes here, as many conclusions as many ways. And this is a very popular thing to say now. I know many people will say, oh, just do whatever. At the end of the day, what matters is you're a good person, or, God will understand, or something like this. Because it seems very open-minded. It's very much a result of today's society that we see so many religions, so many cultures, and people will think, well, the open-minded thing to do is to say, well, they're all true. Every one of them is true some way or another, and they all lead to the same path. It seems very open-minded, very accepting, very tolerant. But actually, it's a great act of intolerance. Because if one says these are all true, or equally true, and they all lead to some ineffable, impersonalist source, then rather than accepting all the parts, actually all of them are being rejected. This is saying, actually, you're all wrong, and the only person who's right is the person who says, actually, these are all just off the mark. If one was to say at least that only one religion is true, in that sense, even the fundamentalist Christian can be considered more open-minded than the impersonalist, because at least the fundamentalist Christian will say that one path is true. At least one path is correct. But if one says this, that all paths are the exact same, they're all leading to some impersonalist thing, and therefore they're all different because they slightly miss the mark, then that is an act of intolerance which rejects all paths. So in the guise of tolerance, in the guise of open-mindedness, actually one of the greatest acts of dismissal, of rejection of all the worldviews and religions and spiritualities of the world is being done. But there is still a variety. And it might be confusing because, of course, it's mentioned in this text here that one should worship with one's intelligence made pure according to the whims and desires of the authorities. So we know that that we should worship Krishna not based on our own desires, not based on what we want. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj would often say in his classes, are you chanting for your own pleasure or for Gaur's, for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's? You should not be chanting thinking, of course it's fine to encourage initially, but the higher conceptions is that one should not be chanting in either their japa or their kirtan thinking, I enjoy this, I feel peaceful, this is something I like doing. They should be chanting with the idea that this is pleasing for Mahaprabhu, this is pleasing for Krishna. So, in general, all things are done. All regulative principles, everything that is given so that we can worship in the way that Krishna finds pleasing. Otherwise, the conceptions that are made are purely ones made for sense gratification. The minds of the jivas in the material world cannot think yet of how to please Krishna. People will sometimes say, they'll say, well, actually what matters is that it doesn't matter that I follow these rules, these advice. What matters is that I love God. And that's true. But the problem is, the majority of people who say that don't love God. They say what matters is that I give God my love, but they don't have any love for God. They think they do, but they don't. There'll be some sentimentality, there'll be some material rasas, maybe they'll find it wholesome, maybe they'll find this or that, but functionally there is no actual love. Once that love is achieved, once it's on the platform of raga, then they can worship outside of the rules and regulations, outside of the direction of the Shastras. But that is when one actually has love for God, and that is not a cheap thing, that is a very hard thing to do. To obtain love for God is to forget an eternity of conditioning in the material world. It's not something that will happen overnight, and it's not something one spontaneously has. One cannot begin devotional service on this platform because one does not have the love that is necessary to please God with. So instead, there need to be the trainer wheels, so to speak, of the rules and regulations. And these are the ones that are given by Krishna, and that is why Krishna has given these rules. He said, this is the way that I like to be pleased. Not only does it allow us to do something which is pleasing to Krishna, which we cannot do spontaneously yet until we are again on that platform of spontaneous devotional service, but it also allows us to delve into that mindset. Because when one is doing something, not because, oh, I think this is pleasing, or I enjoy doing this, but one is doing this because Krishna wants it, because the spiritual master wants it, one begins to cultivate the selflessness which is inherent to the spiritual path. One stops thinking, I'm doing this because I want to do it, but I'm doing this because Krishna wants me to do it. I'm doing this because the spiritual master wants to do it. And in that meditation, in that purification that results from such a mindset, one can be purified, and then maybe with the mercy of the spiritual master, can have some love of Godhead awoken in them. But we'll see there are different directions given. It can be confusing at times. And that is because, even though it is said here that with pure intelligence one will take to devotion, there are many impure intelligences. In fact, all intelligences that have not already taken to it are impure. So there are various different instructions given according to various time, places, and circumstances, which allow for the discrepancy. This is why, again, the issue where the impersonalists will say all parts are valid, all parts are just missing the mark, because they'll say, how can we reconcile all these individual parts? But in actuality, the reconciliation is that all these different parts are given for people at different levels of conditioning and progress in society until they eventually reach the point of that pure intelligence and then take up to devotional service. If one is fortunate to have the association of a pure devotee, then one can skip through all of the progressive parts and can go directly to the source of the to the source of that final intelligence, which then is given, because there is no greater intelligence than to engage the devotional service of the Lord. Many people are very proud, as I said at the beginning, many people are proud of their intelligence, and they'll write many books trying to say that there is no God or anything, or maybe they'll say all sorts of things. They'll try and refute the Vedas, or they'll try to refute Gauriya Vaishnavism, so on and so forth, and they'll feel very intelligent, and maybe they do have some mundane intelligence, but it really is a very insubstantial intelligence. Much more intelligent is maybe someone who has not even, I mean, we can look, they'll be proud of all their degrees and all, but we look at so many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples were maybe high school dropouts, or maybe didn't go off to university, and all these people with their many PhDs or so on and so forth, their intelligence cannot compare even in the slightest, because they have not made a very intelligent decision in their life. They have based their whole views upon their rebellion to Krishna, which is a rebellion that you lose. You don't exactly win in rebellion to Krishna. They've used their intelligence in service of this, and therefore they've used maybe their great intelligence very unintelligently. So but the greatest intelligence is to simply surrender oneself to the pure devotee and to Krishna. So there is a great variety, and as I said, there are many different sort of aspects, different sort of instructions given. We hear this is in Nectar of Instruction as well, that one of the 6 things favorable to devotional service is to follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. And Srila Prabhupada quotes that famous text by Maharaj Yudhishthira, Mahajano Yena Gata Sapantaha. Because of course this helps. Because how can we understand in the great body of the Vedas? Maybe we can say, okay, we have surrendered this idea that I will worship Krishna, I will practice spirituality dependent on my whims, on how I wish to practice it. Maybe we can surrender this idea away, but then approaching the Vedas, it's a bit confusing. Here I'm told how to do sacrifice to demigods. Here I'm being told how to meditate on the impersonal Brahman. Here I'm being told how to do so many yogic processes. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would often say, while referring to the Ashtanga Yoga and all the paths to siddhis, he would say, all of the great glories of the Vedas are not achieved by blowing the nose 3 times. Because as we know, they do that cleansing. So he would say, by the blowing of the nose 3 times, one cannot achieve the great conclusions of all the Vedas. But then how can they be achieved? Obviously by the following of the footsteps of those who have realized the purport of the Vedas, because they are such a great body of work, of course, to appeal to all people, so that nobody can be left out. This is the mercy of the Vedas. Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually writes, he writes in the Krishna Samhita, he talks about the different avatars of Krishna, and he says one of the purports we can take from the fact that there is the half-man, half-lion form, there is the aquatic form, there is the boar form, all these different species are being taken. We can see here reflected, not only are they relevant for their pastime, and not only are they causeless, because of course Krishna's leelas are caused by nothing but his own desire to practice his pastimes, but we can also see reflected the mercy of Krishna. That the mercy of Krishna is not limited to one type of being. Krishna's mercy, the Supreme Lord's mercy, spreads out to all forms of life. All creatures are touched by the mercy of Krishna. Maybe, of course, the human birth is the best to finally obtain liberation, but it is not that Krishna's mercy is limited to any type of being. So in the same way, the Vedas, the Vedic literature, they're not limited to any one type of person. But following, again, anupashyanti, following then in the footsteps of those acharyas, of those great souls who have realized that purport, then one can realize in actuality their conclusions. Otherwise we cannot discover for ourselves. There's so many differing various conclusions. And so then Prabhupada mentions that there is no difference in the conclusions among the Vaishnava acharyas based on the essential truths of this. As we know, it's quoted from Padma Purana, and it's also quoted in Garga Samhita, that famous text which says there are the 4 bona fide Vaishnava sampradayas. These are the ones that Prabhupada is referring to here. There is the one stemming from Shri, from Lakshmi. There is the stemming from the 4 Kumaras, which is sometimes called the Hamsa Sampradaya. Interestingly, because as we know, the 4 Kumaras had that great conversation with Hamsavatar in Bhagavatam in 11th canto we read. So sometimes the Kumara Sampradaya is referred to as the Hamsa Sampradaya. And then there is the Rudra Sampradaya, as we know, and then of course there is the Sampradaya coming from Brahma. These 4 are all there, and each one has predominant acharyas, and each one is preaching in different contexts and preaching different things. However, it is not only that, that each sampradaya has begun with a bona fide devotee of the Lord, but each acharya themselves is bona fide. In fact, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to each one of them and encouraged them and authorized them to do their preaching, and actually said he will take 2 aspects from each one of their philosophies. And the fact of their being bona fide is reflected. If you go to the Samadhi of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, I remember whenever I go to Mayapur, at least at one point in the trip, I'll try to do visit all the temples down that long road. And I remembered by the time I really reached Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada's Samadhi, I had the worst headache on earth because you're doing dandavats to all these temples. I had never had such a bad headache in my life as I did by the time I finished. But it was worth it because all those temples are very nice, very beautiful. But when we reach that Samadhi there, we can go and there's some temples around it. And there's this one temple, and there's this one deity, there's one murti of Radha Krishna and Mahaprabhu. And it's one of the self-manifesting deities of Krishna, and it's very sweet, very beautiful. But around on the side there are 4 other murtis. If one takes, because I went to do parikrama around the murti, and one will find the murtis not just maybe of Madhvacharya, because we are coming from the line of Madhva, but also of Vishnu Swami, but also of Ramanujacharya, and also of Nimbarkacharya. All of them are there. Because this is the conception of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur especially, was so much honing in on this concept of seeking the essence, not seeking externalities, not to be sectarian, but to see what is the essence of Krishna consciousness. Maybe their lines differ from us. Maybe there is maybe we do not hold them in as high esteem as we hold Rupa Goswami because we are trying to cultivate the mood of Rupa Goswami. But that does not mean there is not value in them. And that does not mean that they are not elevated, and does not mean that they are not bona fide. If one cultivates only in this idea of mine and theirs, one will miss that essence of Krishna consciousness. One will become like the people who did not, like the people who so often spoke poorly of Haridas Thakur. So many elements of outward sectarian allegiance he did not hold. But of course, he is the greatest devotee. We all pay respects to him as the great Namacharya. And as we just read, the holy name of the Lord, this is one of, to be chanting constantly and to engage others in the service of, in the chanting of it, that is a sign of the greatest devotee. So Haridas Thakur is having that. He is having that in essence. But he would be rejected in sectarian mindsets. Shukdev Goswami himself. How many people, if they're thinking only on this platform of outward experience or of designations of sect or of organization, how many would not listen to Shukadev? They would see, why is this naked boy speaking? Here, put on your kanti mala, put on a dhoti, put on a tilak and then speak. People might say like this, because they will not think of what is the essence. Obviously, that's not to say, again, that we shouldn't follow those rules. I'm not saying we should give Bhagavatam class in the same way that Shukdev Goswami did. But those rules, as I said at the beginning, are given for a reason. But again, that essence seeking should be there. And that essence of Krishna consciousness, to some extent, is in all of those sampradayas. And that is why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in that temple we can see there is great respect given to all of them. None are not eligible for respect. All Vaishnavas should be respected. Because again, then there is the question, what is the damage to do so? It doesn't cause one any extra effort to, even if it is only mentally offering respects to Vaishnavas and then going on with their days. That is not it is difficult, in fact, to dismiss them. But it is easy to pay one's respect and then continue going on. Of course, not to say that we should imbibe fully their mood. We are trying to follow the mood of Rupa Goswami, especially given to us by Srila Prabhupada. But that point is to be made. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he appeared to each one of those acharyas, and he said he will take 2 points from each one of their philosophies. As we know, the Vedic religion, the Vedic philosophy was dismissed by Buddha because of the abuses of the Brahmins. And then Shiva was sent in the form of Shankaracharya in order to re-establish the preeminence of the Vedic literature by preaching a sort of a bridge philosophy. In a sense, he was a bridge preacher. He was a bridge philosophy. It was Buddhism, but it was in the guise of the Vedic religion. So in this way, he was re-establishing the authority of the Vedas. So with the Vedas being re-established, his mission was done. But as we know, Shankara's philosophy, even though Shankara, he said, he gave some great devotional moments. Now I've forgotten. I think it's his commentary of Shvetashvatar Upanishad. One of his Upanishadic commentaries is actually rejected, Bhanu Maharaj was saying in her class, is actually rejected by the followers of Shankaracharya, even though there's no actual textual reason why, because it was too devotional. They thought it must have been faked. There's no way he would have actually written something as devotional as this. And as we know, he said that great bhajan of Bhaja Govinda. So Shankaracharya was a devotee in a sense, but he was preaching a philosophy which is maybe less than devotional and less than ideal. So it was not enough for the Vedas to be re-established. The true purport of the Vedas had to be re-established. And so Ramanujacharya appeared. And Ramanujacharya, he preached Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. Vedanta, not Advaita, the monism, but qualified monism. Vishishta, the qualified Advaita. And he preached this, and here he began, as Srila Prabhupada said, he is preaching the basic idea that there is a Supreme Lord and we are not the Supreme Lord. Vishishta Dvaita means that the jivas are a quality of the Supreme Lord. So a similar relationship is said that the soul has to the body. It is said that the soul is the Supreme Lord and the body is the material world and the jivas. So in that sense they are one, but in the other sense they are different. So here we find that one of the initial attempts to... Not attempts, this was authorized. And so Mahaprabhu said, he gave him the encouragement. He appeared, I believe, in a dream, it is described. He appeared to Ramanujacharya and he said, you preach this philosophy so you can re-establish theism, personalism, which has been removed by my servant Shankaracharya. And he said, from your philosophy, I will take two aspects. I will take Ananya Bhakti, the unalloyed devotional service, free from notions of karma and jnana, your strong emphasis on this. I will take this from your philosophy, and I will take bhakta jana seva. I will take the attitude of service to the devotees. These are the two aspects that I will find especially sweet in your philosophy, because as we find at the end, after Mahaprabhu takes 2 points from each philosophy, we will find he takes the two great points from each philosophy, because Mahaprabhu didn't come, again, to wipe out all these 4 sampradayas, but he came to conclude them. The final conclusion, what all of them were coming to, what all of their discourses were based on, the summum bonum, the completion of all of Vedanta is found in Mahaprabhu's preaching. So he's taking these 2 points and he'll take 2 points from each other acharya in order that he may give the most complete and most final, taking the best from each source and creating a hybrid of the greatest philosophy. So then after Ramanujacharya, we have Madhvacharya. Actually, I'm not sure where Nimbarkacharya fits in. He fits in somewhere there. There's a little less known about him. Some people will actually argue most of the preaching was done by a different acharya named Nimbaditya. But Madhvacharya, as we know, he is the acharya who we are coming from, and he preached Dvaita Vedanta. He went much, much stronger than Ramanujacharya. There was not even a hint of Advaita, of monism or of non-dualism in his philosophy. That's why you'll often see in photos of Madhvacharya, he is doing this, because so strongly absorbed he was in this preaching, this strong quest to refute notions of monism, that he became associated with the concept of two, because he's always preaching that there are two. And actually, it would be better in a sense to describe his philosophy of one of bhed, of difference. Because he didn't just preach that there is a difference between the soul and the Supreme Lord, which will never be crossed, which in no way, it is complete difference. Never will that expanse be crossed. But also, there is that between the Supreme Lord and the material world, and also between the jivas and the other jivas, and between the jiva and the material world. These are all distinctions that are eternally there. They will never be covered. So there is a strong, again, Dvaita. So he's preaching very strongly. And of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes in his line because of that strong condemnation of this impersonalism, of monism. Even though Mahaprabhu's philosophy is much, in one sense, is reconciling all these things and brings in some non-dualism, there is nothing more antithetical and more revolting in a sense. Prabhupada writes in one purport that actually even the Sahajiyas are slightly better than the Mayavadis, because at least they have some idea of a personal being. There's nothing more revolting to devotional sentiments than this idea that I will become Krishna. So because of that, Mahaprabhu has appeared, and he takes 2 things. He takes the strong rejection of Kevala Advaita, the pure Advaita, the pure monism, the pure impersonalism. I will take that strong rejection and I will take that into my philosophy. And the other thing he will take is the emphasis of worship of Krishna's murti, knowing it to be the eternal form of the Lord. This is not a conception necessarily in every sampradaya, but this is one thing that was taken from Madhva sampradaya, coming down from Brahma. That the Supreme Lord, he is his murti, and that form is eternal, and we must serve that form. Then there is Vishnu Swami and Nimbarka. Nimbarka Acharya, he preached something called Dvaita Advaita. So Dvaita, which is dualism, and Advaita, non-dualism. And the way he sort of explains it is a bit more complex. It's a bit more nuanced than, say, Madhvacharya, although Madhvacharya's philosophy is very nuanced itself. But he sort of says it's like, in the same way that the leaves on the tree are inherent to the tree. There must be a tree for there to be leaves on a tree. For the leaves to exist, there must be a tree existing. In the same way the jivas are there, for the jivas to exist, there must be a Supreme Lord existing. And therefore, because their existence is implied in the Supreme Lord, they are one. But obviously they are very different as well. So this was his philosophy. And the 2 points that Mahaprabhu took from him were Ekanta Radhikashraya, the exclusive shelter of Srimati Radharani, this mood of sheltering oneself in Radharani. We find of these 4 sampradayas, Lakshmi Narayan worship is very prominent with Madhva and Ramanuja. And Nimbarka Acharya, he is the one who's mainly focusing on the mood of the gopis and Radharani. That is where we find some emphasis. They will have a different philosophy. They don't have any idea of separation or anything. It's like a constant union is their idea. But they have something of that, and Mahaprabhu saw that, and he said, I will take this. And then Gopi Bhav, so rather similar to the first point. This idea that the mood of the gopis is such an exalted thing that we should aspire from, Mahaprabhu said, I will take this as well. So he is taking that as well to put into his philosophy. And then lastly, there's Vishnu Swami. Vishnu Swami Sampradaya in general is gone. It doesn't really exist anymore. But it was revitalized under Vallabhacharya. And sometimes it is said Vallabhacharya was another appearance of Vishnu Swami. And as we know, Vallabhacharya, he was a contemporary of Mahaprabhu. We know Mahaprabhu helped him out a bit in understanding philosophy. But Mahaprabhu still, he spoke and he said, from Vishnu Swami philosophy, mainly taking Vishnu Swami's philosophy as explained by Vallabhacharya, because we don't really have an exact knowledge of exactly what Vishnu Swami preached, but we understand Vallabhacharya has come in his line and he has revitalized it, and therefore we can accept him as presenting their philosophy. The 2 points are Tvadiya Sarvasya Bhava, Sarvasva Bhava, which is the idea that Krishna is my everything. Krishna is everything to me is Krishna. I have no other desire, no other thing than Krishna. Because Vishnu Swami, Vallabhacharya, he preached something called Shuddha Advaita. So he preached that everything is Advaita. Shuddha means pure and Advaita means monism. Everything is purely one, but they are manifesting different qualities. So the complete whole one, Satchidananda, is Krishna. Then when that Ananda is hidden away a bit and there is only Sat and Chit, rather than as we explain it, that is Paramatma, he said those are the Jivas. They are Brahman experiencing only Sat and Chit. And then when there's only Sat, then that is the material world. That was his way of understanding. So it is not so much, you can't prove that as strongly as we can, our understanding of Satchidananda referring to Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. But again, that is why Mahaprabhu didn't take that point to incorporate into his philosophy. And then the second thing that he took from his philosophy was the Rag Marg. They refer to it as Pushti Marg. That's why you'll sometimes hear the followers of Vallabhacharya, they will refer to themselves as Pushti Margis. We are on the Pushti Marg. And their sadhana, in this respect, is very, very similar to Raganuga Bhakti, as is described in Nectar of Devotion. It's almost the exact same. We can see there very strongly the influence of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in their philosophy. But Mahaprabhu said, I will take this aspect, the Rag Marg, the Pushti Marg. So he said, taking all of these and seeing all these philosophies, they're saying so many different things with reconciling oneness and difference. Then, of course, we know, as Prabhupada mentions here, he says in that famous text, Jiber Shorup Hoy, Krishna Nittodash. And at the end, Mahaprabhu, at the end of that text, he talks about Achintya Bheda Bhed. Because there's this talk of Bhed and this talk of Abhed, it is very inconceivable. So many great acharyas are presenting different things. The actual conclusion is the reason why so many different ideas are being pulled forth is because ultimately is it achintya. None of these can be necessarily said to be fully wrong. They are perceptions of this. But Mahaprabhu is saying he's giving the final explanation. Why are all of these things given? Why so many different ideas? Because it is achintya. And so that is the highest conception then. Because all these conceptions are capturing one way of trying to understand this. But Mahaprabhu is presenting the final understanding that one cannot fully understand it. And therefore all those different Vishishta Dvaita, Dvaita, Shuddha Dvaita and Dvaita Dvaita are all reconciled most perfectly in Achintya Bheda Bhed. And then by taking these 2 points from each one of these sampradayas, Mahaprabhu has churned the Vaishnava sampradayas. He's churned them to find that great essence from them all. And taking that great essence, he has given an ambrosial final philosophy, final sadhana, which is taking the good points from all of these and then adding, of course, the extra mercy, the extra realizations, the extra conceptions, which none of them knew before, which, as we know, began to be introduced by Madhavendra Puri, but then which the fruit finally came into form in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, and what is that philosophy? That philosophy is, of course, summarized most perfectly in thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord at every second, and by following the footsteps of the authorities. There are all these great authorities, but our greatest authority is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has given us the essence and greatest points of all the other authorities. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is most perfectly represented by his Shenapati Bhakta, Srila Prabhupada. So by reading his books and by serving Srila Prabhupada, we may fulfill that. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.